During the late summer of 1982, Denise Stoner had an abduction experience while traveling through a remote area of Colorado with her family. It would be almost 30 years before she would be able to recall what took place through regression therapy. She co-authored a book, The Alien Abduction Files, with Kathleen Marden about her experience, and she's keen to set the record straight following some unqualified conjecture about her experience. She joins us now. Hi, Denise.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really good. Great to have you. We spoke earlier this year, of course, for the Aliens Revealed Live Summit, and we got a lot of great feedback. But today, or in this interview, we wanted to kind of set the record straight with some information that's been filtering out there. Your event took place on the 13th of August in 1982, and you want to respond to an article that contained parts that weren't factual about your experience. And there are 4 questions in particular. But before you answer those questions, can we go through what took place in 1982 so our audience can get an idea of what you experienced?
Exactly. Yes. My husband, myself, and our daughter took a trip every weekend that we could, especially in the summertime, from Denver, Colorado to Buena Vista, just outside Buena Vista, Colorado, where we had a camp up in the mountains. It was backed by BLM land, that's federal, 1,800 acres that we could walk on and look for arrowheads and just relax. So in order to do that, in order to get there, we had to travel through a glacier valley. It was called South Park. There was a little town called South Park also. So we would stop on the top of a pass that dropped down into that valley every single time, just to get out of the car and stretch. It was a 2.5, 3-hour trip. We had set the odometer just to make sure everything was working right with the car, and my husband was real good about that. So we looked down into the valley. We could see a little town called Jefferson, tiny, tiny little town. Other than that, there was nothing but open high desert. Only this time I could see 2 lights off in the desert. I thought it was a reflection at first, except they were traveling toward the only road across that high desert. And as we got back in the car, dropped down into the valley, the lights came toward us. Ended up over the car, picked the car up, took us into the high desert. We landed on the high desert way off in the distance. And we were there for I don't know how long, because we ended up on the other side of that valley in the dark. We intended to arrive at our camp in the daytime. Didn't happen. My husband was holding onto the steering wheel, didn't respond to me. He was staring straight ahead. I couldn't get him to answer me. We ended up in a place called Trout Creek Pass, which was approximately 9 miles from our camp. We don't know how we got across that valley and ended up in the dark an hour, 2 hours from where we should have been. Headlights on, motor running, and we began to wonder what had happened to us. We did recall lights over the top of the car. I remembered being lifted. He did not.
Mm-hmm.
Went into camp, parents and friends waiting for us, wanting to know what happened. They were getting ready to call the police, hospitals, anybody they could think of. And my dad was going to get in the car and drive that road to see if we'd had an accident. So later on, after having some strange dreams, wondering what could have happened. I was familiar with UFOs. I had been taken since age 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if that had occurred again, only this time with the family. So I began to research. I had some hypnosis done. I discovered that's exactly what had happened to us. So.
Yeah. So, the regression therapy helped you kind of pinpoint the particular event. So maybe we can kind of run through and what happened, because the questions after that that you want to clear up will certainly answer what people are looking for.
In that particular time, I was taken into the craft and a wire was embedded into my foot, which later started to come out by itself many years later after we'd moved from Colorado to Florida. I believe it was some sort of tracking device,
Hmm.
a little bit different from something they later implanted about the size of a grain of rice. This was an actual wire they ran up my foot and into my leg. Um, I did see ETs, two different kinds. One I called the doctor. One was who I called my escort from the time I was a child. And I can tell you, I have told only Kathy and one other person that he was young when I met him. We don't
Hmm.
think that they age,
Right.
but I've seen him recently in a dream and actually later on in meditation, and he has aged. I don't know if anybody else that saw him would notice. I wish I had a forensic artist
Right.
that could draw him from when I met him as a child until now, but he has aged. I don't know if he is aged less in a way, but
Yeah.
he's different.
The wire they inserted in your foot, did you realize you had that in your foot before you were regressed?
Um, I did because it started to come out by itself. I had something begin to erupt between my big toe and the one next to it. Didn't know for sure what was going on. It was very tender, and I felt it, and I felt this very hard stabbing thing. I could tell it was wire, and then I had a memory of what it was as soon as I touched it. I don't know if touching it caused the memory
Hmm.
or if I just suddenly knew what it was. So I went to the doctor and he gave me antibiotics. He did not want to try to pull it out or x-ray it until the inflammation, and it was infected until it went down. But it disappeared before I could go back.
The wire disappeared.
It did.
Because
It
I was
either
going to,
came,
I was going to ask whether you had it analyzed, but if it's disappeared, you couldn't.
couldn't do it. Everything went away, settled down, the infection was gone, and no sign of that
Wow,
wire. When I asked the doctor, what is that? He said, I don't know. He didn't know.
that's some amazing piece of technology. Um,
Mhm.
Now they also put something in your eye.
Yes, that was painful. They had some kind of an instrument that had this tiny, tiny pearl shaped, it was white object, and inserted it right into the tear duct.
Hmm.
That was very painful, but again, I think it was another type of tracking device, something they could use um, to either let me know or they knew where I was and to signal when they were coming to get me.
Wow. Did that eventually disappear as well?
Came out, yes.
Okay.
Since that involved the eustachian tube and sinus cavities, I had an object fall out one night when I was lying in bed, and I felt an itching in my ear, of all places. And again, that's all tied together, that tear duct, the eustachian
Yeah.
tubes, and so on. So I reached up to itch my ear, and a tiny little object fell out, and I noticed that it was hard. I took it through. I have a microscope, put it under the microscope, and it was faceted like a crystal. It was really
Hmm.
pretty. So I took it back to bed since it was in the middle of the night, and I had a lid from a medicine bottle. I put it inside the lid and expecting to look at it closer the next morning, it was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Now the ET you referred to as the doctor, what race was he or did he resemble?
Insect. Yeah. He was definitely the insect type. He was very tall, very strong, and very intelligent. He looked at me a couple of times when I showed emotion as if he was confused. What was I doing? Why was I behaving that way or showing fear? He looked at me, tipped his head. He had that long
Hmm.
look of the mantis,
Yeah.
um, and then backed up. He didn't understand it.
Did he show care?
Yeah, he was busy. He was a scientist. That's the only way I can put
Yeah.
who he was. He showed nothing on his own face except by the tip of his head, curiosity.
Wow. Now, I was wondering, I mean, I've spoken to a few experiences lately, and all of them have were part of a hybrid program. Do you think that's why you were there?
Yes, at the time, absolutely, I was. Yes,
Yeah, and the amazing thing is that I'm not. It's not just one race involved in this. There are different types of aliens all involved.
I agree. Yes. Um, Something I was told when I actually miscarried um, on the side of a mountain in an outhouse. I didn't know what it was, and I blocked the memory out of fear. I was afraid someone was going to come and see it because it was winter time or late fall. It was cold in Colorado. I had been having cramping all day. Decided we would go on a picnic. That would make me feel better because I had no idea what was going on. Went into that outhouse, and when I turned around and looked, what I saw scared me so much
Hmm.
that I blocked it, and I went up to the picnic table where my husband was. He was standing with a relative and our daughters still frozen in place. There was a craft right there. My escort came and took me into the craft, and they said, "We want to show you something." That's where I saw the vials of hybrids in all stages of growth. When we got to the last one, I call it the quickening because when I got to the vial, an almost fully formed hybrid was in there, and it shuddered. And I think it was a girl, opened its eyes and looked right at me. And I knew she was mine,
Wow.
close to birth. Something I was told, I can't find anyone else that has heard the same thing. I was told, now there are mistakes, there are errors, there are things that go wrong. And if they do, you get to keep and raise those children.
Wow.
I don't
It,
have an answer to that.
no, no. Um, and that was, I was going to ask, are the hybrids destined to live their life on Earth or elsewhere? Did they give any clue in that area?
Elsewhere, if I'm understanding correctly what I was told,
Hmm.
elsewhere, if they're fine, but if they're not, we're raising them here, and who are they?
Right, right. Wow. So one of the questions that there's four main questions that have been asked about your experience, and the first one has to do with a question about what was the glow in the middle of the room and what color was it. So I guess we could start there. Maybe we can kind of give the background of how we got to that question.
Yeah. Well, I was taken on a tour of a craft to see how that craft operated. And there was a tremendous amount of emotion involved because when I got to the center of that craft and I saw the room to my right, and my escort said, "We're not going to be able to spend a long time in here because it will affect you in many ways." And when I walked in, and I began to walk on a flooring that was moving as I took each step. I can't tell you that it was spongy. I can't tell you that it bounced. It was just moving
Right.
gently as I walked. And it was above a liquid. Underneath my feet, there was a red liquid flowing. I was observing that. I was looking around. There was a mistake made in whoever, well, I know who wrote it, who wrote this article and had it put out on Facebook, that the room had foliage and trees in it. It did not. There was some green. I don't exactly know what that green was, if it was something that caused this living being, this organic being, this biological being that was in that room. It had a heartbeat. The whole room had a heartbeat. There was a glow. What was the glow? I think it had something to do with the spirit of the being. Just my feeling.
Okay. Was the being itself like a humanoid?
No, um, there was something human within the makeup of the room. There was something at the back of the room that wasn't totally clear, that had a face. This was also misconstrued in what was drawn, because I couldn't really see the whole face. I just knew that there was some sort of expression to the makeup of the room and of the being that made up this biological entity. I'm going to call it an entity.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like I'd ever seen or felt before. It had a heartbeat. You could feel the room throbbing like a heart.
What? So what in your estimation was its function? I mean, was it there all the time? Is that what its role
Yes.
was?
Its role was to operate that craft, which was very small. It was kind of like a pod, and there were many of them, and they were all communicating one with the other. But as a whole, if you took each pod, and this was my understanding, they communicated with a massive mothership, and they
Wow.
could all link. They all knew where each other were, in position one with the other. And if recalled, they could very quickly join with this massive mothership.
Okay, because that was part of the description you gave when you first spotted the lights. That I think it was three glowing lights, and they seemed to come together, and they seemed to be one, and then they parted.
Yes, and I cannot tell you if that's the situation. When I saw those lights, I don't know. All I know is that this room is not like anything I had ever visited, experienced before. And I felt it, and Kathleen Marden did my hypnosis to try and draw more information from me, which she did. I got a good look at the room, but it affected me in a way as if someone were throwing beanbags at your muscles,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reacting to it. She was a little bit concerned with the emotions that I was showing and how my body was reacting. So she brought me out of hypnosis, and she then discussed it with me. And I said, I want to do this again. I want to go back and I want to film it, which we did.
Right.
Kathleen has the rights to all my information. She has all of my medical records. She has this video and has the right to use it. Um, we have been working together researching this, and I have found a way. I know how to do self-hypnosis, but I have found a way also through meditation to take a look at this room when I want to, and it's become clearer. Anybody that has had these experiences often gets more information as they work on it. Once you see it, it doesn't go away.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd
um,
imagine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, couple of questions then. Was the entity aware that you were there in the room, and who actually showed you around? Was it the doctor?
No, it was my escort, the larger gray, the taller gray,
Right.
the one that I said has aged. And it was telepathic information from this being who told me, and it was a female. This one was female. Matter of fact, they may all be. I had that feeling. I don't know that I was told, but I had the feeling. They volunteered between lives to take this on. And they also, and this was something I got very recently, they were not trapped. in that situation, that they could leave out of body, whatever they were made up of, out of body, and travel freely. I don't know. What if it's a vacation?
Yeah. Yeah.
That they were not trapped. They could do this um, to get a break from this situation occasionally. I was told that, and I can't find anyone else that has said that. But this is a volunteer situation, a contract they signed between lives.
Okay. So they've died. Um, they've
Mhm.
left. So we're assuming that they have a soul,
Oh,
and
yes.
and before they start their next life, they, I guess, do call it community service.
They've signed up for this. They had a reason for it, and they felt they needed to do this volunteer work. Hmm.
Wow. So the entity was actually uh, inside a flesh and blood being, or part of.
That's not what I saw, but they were living. They had a soul. They were biological. They were organic. They were a combination of so many things that were living all inside that room. There was spirit in that room.
Yeah.
The whole room was alive.
Wow. Wow. So I wonder if as human beings, I mean, we're all part of that same soul family.
I think we're all a part of all that is. I had a near death experience, and I have kind of taken a look at that again. And during a meditation, that's when I saw my escort and saw that he had aged. But during a near death experience, which was very strange and different and kind of wondrous to me, where when you pass away or have the near death experience, you have vision that is 360.
Hmm.
You don't have to turn around to
Yeah,
see behind
and
you.
that's what everyone says.
Hmm. Um, Everything is right there for you to see. And I think that these advanced beings already know that. And they've gone even a little further than what we've been shown. We've got a little further to go yet.
Right.
And so I think this being that I saw has been there and then some, or she wouldn't be able to operate this craft.
Yeah. When you were shown this, Denise, was this part of the 1982 abduction, or was this another separate event?
This was a part of that time. There were several times that I was taken during that year, and also after we moved to Florida, I was taken. So, as Kathy can tell you, I don't always remember every single hypnosis session, and I don't always remember exactly when things take place after they occur because some of them are emotional. Um, I can put them all together, not in order necessarily. So it's happened more than once.
Right.
It's almost like I know her and
Yeah.
I'm protecting her in some way.
Right.
Yeah.
Denise, you've done an amazing body of work in this field over a number of years. Have you run across any other experiencer that had the same type of experience as you had?
I can tell you that some will tell you that they have seen or they know that there is a craft out there or crafts that are operated in this way. I don't know if they would describe it like I do, how close they would come, but yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, Back in 1982, you were taken, but other members of your family, your husband and your daughter, were left in the car. Do you know why?
I don't think my husband was left in the car. Why? Because he allowed Kathy to do some hypnosis work with him. And he started to describe a table and a cold feeling, and something that began to describe being inside the craft. He had asked her ahead of time not to ask him whether or not he saw the ETs. So we think he was in that craft. And then
Okay.
here in Florida, when we were on a scuba diving trip, he witnessed me being put back in the truck, and he was able to draw the ET that he saw that time. And the
Wow.
feeling that he had been under anesthesia, which has occurred more than once with him. So we don't know how many times he might have been in a craft, but at least that once, we think so.
Right. Right. Um, the um, the hierarchy structure on that particular ship, there was the mantis type alien, and then was the greys, and then you mentioned your guide was a bit taller. So is there
Mhm.
kind of like a structure that exists? Is there one superior over the other?
There are the small grays, and I call those the soldiers. They didn't move, I think. Those are robots. They move when they're told to.
Right.
This is where people get confused. My tall gray, um, he's a spirit. He is a being. He's not a robot. And I think that the scientist or the doctor, the insect, is a being also, and he is in charge of anything scientific. I think they work together. I think that when they're needed, what they're needed for, they can come together. A craft that I was on, um, the ETs were a mixture. It's as if they'd all come, all different kinds came together, and they were doing an experiment. It did not end well because they had captured or taken many of us for a purpose, and it was wrong, and it was too late to back out of it.
Mhm.
But they were very frustrated and wondering why things had gone wrong in this experiment. And I had been taken from my bed. I was awake, and they took my husband and sent him to another room. We were given black boxes to drop off a craft. I was over a place maybe like Colorado from Florida or Switzerland or somewhere, and this huge craft had a balcony. I felt like I might
Wow.
fall off because of some strange gravity it had when the craft tipped and the balcony opened. We didn't fall off. We were walking down a hallway, and the different various ETs, some operating the craft, some running here and there. I may have seen people that I know. There were two walkways, two hallways. Some of us went to the left, some to the right, out to this balcony. When I was handed this black box, I realized what was in it. Didn't feel like I deserved to take that black box. But I couldn't drop it or hand it back. We were put on the balcony. It was opened. I looked out over this craft. It was enormous, absolutely enormous, kind of a dull black. They tipped it. And when they cued us to drop the box, and we did, I saw small little A-frames below, tall pine trees, snow on the ground. I was given a specific home to drop the box over, and I know what was inside of it was the soul of a hybrid.
Wow.
A human hybrid was being given a home here on Earth.
So it was a soul, and it needed to find a host.
Yes, it was going to be born in that home here on Earth. And I didn't feel like I should be the one to carry what was contained in that box. It was very precious. Another time of strong emotion. I didn't deserve to hold that. Why was I holding something like that? It was a small box, no seams, but it had some weight to it. And when I discovered what was in it, I didn't want anything to do with that situation. It's not something anybody should do. deliver a soul.
Mm-hmm.
Um, why? And I think that the ETs realized that that was wrong to do also, and it was too late to stop that project.
Wow. Denise, does it get any easier over the years relating your story?
Um, it it's not easy because people are going to say, "Boy, there's a nut." But I've heard stories that are way far out from mine. People know when something happens to them, you know what you know. And I've decided that it doesn't matter anymore. I'm going to tell it. And if people can connect with it, that's wonderful because it'll help them. I support people when I talk to them. I listen. I understand. It needs to be done. It's at my age. What the heck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, back in 1982, I mean, we had some amazing abduction cases back then. Of course, Travis Walton,
Yes.
Calvin Parker, and Terry Lovelace
Yes.
are three that just come to mind. But to come out and speak about them back then, you know, would have got you a lot of grief. But today, with the work you're doing and Kathy Marden through
Uh-huh.
Mufon, are you finding that people are more willing to tell their story?
A little bit. I think that once I do, people will come up to me if I'm speaking somewhere, or I get phone calls. This will probably bring phone calls or email asking for help. And they'll say, "You did this, and can I talk to you?" So I think it really, really helps people. And I know Travis, and I went to visit Mr. Parker. It's just a connection between all of us. And of course, Kathy and I have been friends now for, gosh, I think 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's been a real important friendship for both of us um, because we can support each other, and knowing that we wrote that book and how we met, it's just something that people can't explain. Everybody, we find each other.
Yeah,
Um, we find each other, and that's just a true blessing.
because you talk about yourself and Kathy meeting each other, and it was what do you call it, synchronicity?
Yes. Yeah, true. Not knowing we lived only a few miles from each other for at least a couple of years, having no idea, a small town in the middle of the mountains, and I could have walked by her and not known it. We probably saw the same craft on the same day, broad daylight, and why? There
Mm-hmm.
had to have been a purpose to that. Um, and then talked about it when I met her, and she said, "You lived where?"
Yeah.
Gunnison, Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite amazing. And the book, of
Mhm.
course, the alien abduction files. Now,
Yes.
it's about your story. Is there another story involved?
Oh, yes. I wrote the first third of That's My Story. There's a lot more than what I told just now. And then Jenny Henderson. I was not allowed to meet her. That's an important part of it. Kathy wrote that because there's a good possibility I was on the same craft with Jenny Henderson. That doesn't happen too often. I kept wondering why Kathy was asking me, do you know what you were wearing on this craft? Do you know what color was it? Did you see somebody with this on? And so until the book was completed, I didn't get to meet Jenny. So that was interesting to find myself most likely on the same craft with her. And then the others that are in there, of course, they're mostly all well known, and we wrote briefly about them. And then a research that we did, and the statistics of that.
Right.
Yeah, some of the
Right.
commonalities among abductees.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I had a good look. Kathy sent me a copy of the experience research. I think it was released a couple of years ago, and there was some
Mhm.
amazing work done there. Um,
Yeah.
do you find people contact, experiences will contact you or Kathy or the Mufon Experiencer research team thinking that they want to tell their story, but they really want to tell someone just to get it off their chest rather than and go public about it?
Yes, they do. They'll ask to remain confidential, and we will make sure that they retain their anonymity. And they appreciate that a great deal. And sometimes once they tell it, they feel so much better. That's it. They'll ask, if we need to get in touch with you again, can we do that? Sure. And we may never hear from them after that. They're so relieved to let that out and have us just listen and understand and say, you're right. We know what you know, and they're good.
Yeah. Before I started doing this work, I just assumed that all abduction cases were the same. But since being involved, they're not all the same. We've got malevolent, we've got benevolent, we've got the CE5 experiences, and then we've got the alien, I guess the mainstream alien abductees. And the one thing I've noticed, and I hope you don't mind kind of maybe talking about this, but there seems to be just a tiny bit of friction between all these groups, because I've done several articles on pretty nasty alien abductions, and I've copped grief from the other side, and it totally floored me. I couldn't understand what was going on. I thought everyone was on the same team, but those people that have the good experiences don't want to hear about the bad experiences. Do you think that's healthy?
It's a little difficult. I ran into what I would call the nasty reptilians twice. And it's very difficult for me to take on an investigation. Just because I ran into them, I was taken once, and I don't know what's going on because everything involving that particular episode, they had military uniforms on, could not identify them because they had no collar insignia. They had the military jacket. We had humans wearing military uniforms, and I cannot recall, no matter what I do, the lecture that I was given by those individuals with the reptilian there. I could tell they were very strict. They were preaching something that I felt was negative, and I just don't understand what the purpose of it was. If they were going to take me, they had something to say. Let me recall at least some of the wording. Marching up and down, holding clipboards, as if they were giving orders of some kind. I don't like them. Just have a bad feeling. And people that I've spoken to that want me to listen to them, they can tell me that they were treated badly. They're very rough. It's not a good feeling. So others will say, but they love you. But that's some of their ploy. We love you. We think you're terrific. And then bam, something nasty. It's a difficult situation. So some that really believe these are the loving beings are going to argue with those who feel it's not the truth.
Yeah, yeah. I find it, yeah, I mean, I just feel sympathy for people that have had the bad experiences, that they're just totally misunderstood and almost outcast.
Yeah, it's true. It's a difficult place to be. And I don't know what I completely think about it, except that I was very uncomfortable when I saw them. They've not come near me again. Either they know it, that I want nothing to do with them, or I've been with these beings that are worthy of my time and attention.
Right.
And that's that. I don't know. I wish I did.
I guess from my point of view, the good thing about the good aliens versus the bad aliens is that the good aliens would have evolved to a stage in in their lives where they would perhaps be past being nasty and more loving, whereas the ones who are more aggressive are probably going through a phase in their history where aggressiveness is still part of their culture, and I guess they need to be aggressive because they've got a conquering mentality.
It could be. Why do they appear so militant? Why are they working with humans, at least they look human, wearing the military getup? And we can't identify them. No insignia whatsoever, but it is a military uniform. And the others, I've experienced healing. They're helping us. They may harm us by taking samples, and they may harm us by not realizing that we feel pain like we do when they're working with us. However, I've had some healing from these entities, so I don't see them as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Denise, almost run out of time here, but fascinating discussion, and I hope we've answered those important questions about your experience back in '82 and also when you went on that tour, and I hope that satisfies everyone.
I hope so too. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. And the alien abduction files is also available for. I mean, I've read the book twice. I was reading it through last night before I came on to talk to you today. But it's just fascinating, and it's written in a style where Kathy's asking the questions as the therapist, and you're in the chair answering the questions. So it's very, very easy to read.
Yeah, I think that's the way it should be, that I could respond and just tell it like it is, tell it like I saw it at the time.
Okay. Denise, thank you, and we'll be talking to you again shortly, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you so much.
Denise Stoner joining us today.